The series begins in the future, when a deadly virus strikes humanity and causes civilization to collapse rapidly. Entire continents descend into chaos, violence, and cannibalism. However, the virus does not spread across the sea. In Germany, safety survives only on the island of Helgoland. The island is completely cut off from the outside world, and exactly 513 people live there. To preserve resources, whenever a baby is born, one resident must sacrifice their life. The island is ruled by strict laws. Anyone who breaks them is sent to the edge of the cliff, and a formal vote decides who must die and who still has a chance to prove their worth. 1 year after the outbreak, Emily gives birth on Helgoland while journalist Lola documents everything. The baby is born healthy and receives a blessing from her grandfather. Shortly afterward, he leaves the clinic and walks to the cliff, revealing that he volunteered to die so his granddaughter could take his place. He says goodbye to his family without knowing that Dr. Merrick has just discovered something shocking. Emily was pregnant with twins, and the second baby is about to be born. No one expected this, especially since the hospital lacks proper equipment. The council debates what to do about the second baby. Some argue that no one should die and the island should temporarily increase to 514 residents. Others insist that making one exception would open the door for more demands in the future. In the end, Beatrice announces that the people will vote on the matter. The news broadcast covers the story and reminds everyone about the ranking list. Christian is ranked 511 and completely loses it when he sees his name on the screen. He says that if chosen, he will not jump. His friend Hendrik reminds him that the last person who refused was forced into a cage and pushed off anyway. Ranked 512 is Elise, an elderly woman considered a burden because she can no longer contribute much. The third candidate is Etienne, viewed by many as a criminal, though he swears he works hard. The next day, Merrick and his son Linus return to the lab to continue working on a vaccine. Merrick feels frustrated due to the lack of supplies and fresh samples, believing they cannot make real progress like this. Later, Judith accompanies Merrick to distribute medicine around town. Their first stop is Etienne's home, where his wife Lisa blames Judith for his low ranking. Judith reminds her that Etienne stole medicine, but Lisa explains that he had no choice after doctors refused to help. He was trying to save his sick wife and was punished with 4 weeks without food. The argument ends when a neighbor arrives to collect Lisa's grandfather's watch, revealing that they had been buying votes. Lisa begs Merrick to speak to Beatrice, and he promises to try. Meanwhile, Emily wakes suddenly from a nap after hearing a noise and finds Elise holding the baby. She immediately takes her child back and accuses Elise of trying to harm the baby to save herself. Elise swears she would never hurt the child and says she found the baby near the stairs and was trying to help. Back at the lab, Merrick puts on a protective suit and opens a hidden locked door. Inside is Peter, a sick man from the mainland being used as a test subject. The agreement states that if the treatment works, he will be allowed to live on the island once he recovers. After receiving an injection, Peter says he feels better, giving Merrick hope that the drug might actually be working. At the same time, Lisa secretly meets Hendrik to accept his offer of food in exchange for her body. The moment is interrupted by an alarm announcing that people from the mainland are approaching the island. Since Hendrik does not get what he wants, he gives her only 1 can of food and rushes to the beach. The guards see a boat approaching and warn them to turn back or they will open fire. The group does not listen. One guard shoots and kills one of the newcomers. The others panic and try to flee, but Hendrik continues firing to eliminate them all, which leads to him being harshly reprimanded by team leader Mia. Hours later, everyone gathers for the vote. The rankings are adjusted, and Christian is no longer among the bottom 3. The people vote to allow the second baby to stay. Among the 3 candidates, Etienne receives the most votes to be executed. At that moment, Lisa publicly accuses Hendrik of assault. Other women step forward to support her. Hendrik claims everything was consensual, but the women argue that he exploited desperate people by trading food for sex. Parents quickly side with the women. Beatrice has no choice but to acknowledge that Hendrik committed coercion and theft, and she allows a second vote. Nearly everyone votes to execute him. However, Beatrice says she is a mother and cannot kill her own son. Instead, Hendrik will be imprisoned rather than executed. The parents protest, but their objections are ignored. Hendrik is taken away to prison. Lola records everything, but when she edits the footage, she removes the parts showing the public's protests. At the same time, Merrick returned to the lab and realized that Peter was not improving. He gave him another injection and promised it would help, but moments later Peter died, so Merrick burned the body. The next morning, Linus told Merrick that he was joining Maya's expedition team to the mainland to gather updates about the outside world. Merrick tried to stop him, but Linus refused to listen. Soon after, the residents gathered to say goodbye to the expedition team, which was also taking Hendrik with them. As he boarded the boat, Hendrik headbutted Etienne, and the others had to pull him away by force. During the trip, the team shared stories about the mainland, imagining it like the end of the world, full of zombies. When they finally reached the shore, they pushed Hendrik off the boat. He begged and tried to give a speech to gain their sympathy, but Heinz punched him because women in his family had been Hendrik's victims. Hendrik even offered a bribe if they took him back. Heinz fired a shot near him to make him run, and Maya had to step in to stop Heinz from attacking him again. Then the team headed back to the island. Later, Beatrice was called to the desalination plant because there were serious filtration problems that nearly shut the system down. While workers searched for the issue, one of them found a radio and showed it to Beatrice, who was shocked since radios are forbidden on the island. Shortly after, the chief engineer, Ike, announced that he had fixed the problem. Beatrice praised his excellent work, but when he asked to bring his wife to the island since she was not infected, she refused. Meanwhile, the expedition continued by boat along the river toward the city and found it in terrible condition. The soldiers went ashore to collect samples and told Linus to stay on the boat. On a bridge, Maya and the soldiers met traders they had dealt with before. Suddenly, a desperate man begged to go to the island, but the traders beat him. Maya gave the trader fresh food in exchange for medicine and 2 large containers. Back on the boat, Linus grew tired of waiting and began exploring the area. He found a group of survivors who claimed the virus had disappeared. He didn't believe them and raised his weapon, but they mocked him and walked away. Then Mojic approached him and handed him a bottle of medicine, saying there were many more in a lab on an abandoned ship. Linus agreed to go with him. Inside the ship, Mojic showed him a crate full of medicine and said there was even more, along with proper equipment, in the real lab. He asked for asylum for himself and his friends in exchange. Linus tried to explain that the decision was not his to make, but suddenly he found himself surrounded by survivors. Frightened, he ran. At the same time, Maya's team was returning to the boat when a survivor jumped on Heinz and tried to rip off his mask. The soldiers beat the man and boarded the boat, only to realize Linus was missing. They said they could not waste time and left without him. Just then, Linus emerged from the ship and saw them leaving. He ran after them. One survivor tried to stop him, but Linus hit him and kept running. He climbed to a higher spot and jumped toward the river, landing on the boat just in time. To everyone's surprise, Mojic jumped after him, and Maya immediately struck him. The soldiers then noticed a tear in Linus's protective suit, so they shot him with a tranquilizer to knock him out. Later on the island, Linus woke up and secretly kept the medicine bottle in his hand as he was taken to a cell. They washed him thoroughly. When Merrick came to see him, Linus handed over the medicine and told him about the lab. Merrick gave him precautionary injections. Shortly after, Heinz was brought into another cell, coughing nonstop. Merrick examined him and found a skin rash. Merrick tested the medicine Linus had brought back and confirmed it was real. He asked Beatrice to send another team to the mainland, but she refused, saying having 2 people already in quarantine was a major issue. Before leaving, she instructed him to give Heinz a fake treatment. Merrick was devastated by the order. On the mainland, the trader's men pulled Mojic's body from the water and found medicine in his pocket. Their leader ordered them to search for Mojic's companions. Meanwhile, Hendrik reached the city and saw a survivor trading a watch to a woman in exchange for disinfection. Hendrik tried to do the same, but he only had a keychain, so the woman threatened him to stay away. To prove he had no rash, Hendrik took off his clothes and used the moment to seduce her. She fell for it, and they danced together while listening to her boombox. But when Hendrik asked to drink from her water bottle, she slapped him. Later, she gave him new clothes and showed him around, explaining her cleaning routine in the theater where she lived. She mentioned that her last assistant had accidentally burned to death because of the disinfectant alcohol. She kept bringing up the traitor, but every time Hendrik asked about him, she went silent. When she was distracted, Hendrik attacked her from behind and beat her to death. Back on the island, Beatrice spoke with Lisa and praised her bravery, especially for standing up against Hendrik. She used the opportunity to recruit Lisa as her eyes and ears on the island, promising her and her husband a better life. In a later television appearance, Lisa publicly agreed that Hendrik's punishment had been merely an exception. In the lab, Merrick convinced Judith to help him with the research since he was moving slowly without Linus. When they opened the crates sent by the traitor, Judith was horrified to find 2 men inside. Merrick, however, was not surprised, as it was part of the agreement. The men were locked in secret cells and injected with Marek's experimental vaccines. Unfortunately, Heinz died before they could find a treatment to save him. In the other cell, Linus hid the fact that he too had developed a skin rash. During a town meeting, Beatrice announced Heinz's death and blamed Maya as the responsible leader. Maya objected, but Beatrice refused to listen and called for a vote to deduct a point from Maya's record. Suddenly, Lola's daughter, Fiona, started coughing, and her friends imitated her, causing everyone to run. Beatrice stayed put and announced that Maya would lose points, so her name was added to the list. Later, the council voted in favor of holding parents responsible for their children's actions. The next morning, Fiona returned, and Lola suspected she might be pregnant. She took her to see Lore, who had a device to confirm the pregnancy. Lola wanted Fiona to force Lore to terminate it, since the pregnancy was illegal, but Fiona refused and ran away. Then Lore told Lola that there was a tea they could use to end the pregnancy. When Lola returned home, she pretended she wanted to check on Fiona and gave her the tea. After Lola left the room, Fiona's boyfriend, Tom, came out of hiding and promised her he wouldn't join the team and that he would take care of her new family instead. The next day at the lab, the patients from the mainland were being treated, and Mark told everyone they needed to work faster on the cure because they didn't have much time. When Judith tried to ask why, he refused to explain. Later, Judith gave an injection to her patient, who revealed that her brother had sold her to the Earl in exchange for food. Meanwhile, Mark was examining Linus, who was experiencing strange temperature changes and having bizarre dreams. Eventually, Linus developed a skin rash, and Mark admitted that he had known since Lynn returned, explaining his urgency. Linus convinced Mark to use him as a test subject too because he wanted to be useful before he died. On the mainland, the Earl confronted Mojak's gang, with the body behind them, and told them that the islanders were responsible. The Earl promised them better living conditions if they revealed the location of the ship. However, Spark was skeptical and told him that Mojak had been lying. After sending the other gang members away, the Earl spoke privately with Spark and convinced him they could reach an agreement. Spark knew the Earl wanted to get to the island at any cost, so he requested protection, and the Earl agreed and gave him his word. Back at the lab, Mark gave Linus his injection before he left. Outside, he saw Mai in prison preparing weapons as punishment, so Mark offered her a deal. She could go free if she went to the mainland to find the ship containing the medicine Linus had mentioned. But Mai didn't want any more trouble and told Mark to speak to Beatrice first. Meanwhile, Hendrik was wandering with Wilma in a cart. When he saw a young girl, he gave her batteries in exchange for information. At that moment, 3 men appeared behind him, zapped him with a stun device, and covered his eyes. When Hendrik regained consciousness, he found himself hanging upside down, stripped of his clothes. The woman was part of the gang that had kidnapped him and now wanted to kill him, but when Hendrik said he worked with the Earl, they hesitated. They didn't believe him at first, but they didn't want to take risks, so they took him to see the Earl. Hendrik introduced himself as Beatrice's son and pretended he had been engaged on the team's last visit to make it seem like he had been accidentally left behind, ensuring Beatrice would pay. He also told them that Wilma had died from the virus, and her last wish had been to gather all her belongings for the Earl. He used this information to his advantage, paid the gang, and stayed with them. Later, he saw the Earl's rabbit meat factory, went to see Hendrik tied up, and told him that tests confirmed he was not infected. He also provided information showing that Beatrice had expelled Hendrik and that Wilma had been killed. Hendrik shared information from Elias about the island's defenses and weak points, so Vaylor decided to let him live. The next day, the island held interviews for the mainland to fill the empty spot left after Heinz's death. A woman named Kiso attended, and after testing confirmed she wasn't infected, she was interviewed via screen. Since she had pharmacy training, Mark asked her several questions to check her knowledge, and she answered them all correctly, advancing to the final round. Meanwhile, Etienne was working at the island's last mill thanks to Lisa's new friendship with Beatrice. While using the tools, Etienne gave a bottle of liquor to the manager, Joachim, who took it. Then Etienne went home. In the afternoon, Beatrice gathered the islanders and presented two of the best candidates for a new citizen, Kiso, and a surgeon named Daniela. Daniela gave a long speech about her experience in the post-virus world. Both women answered Mark's questions well, but during voting, Daniela easily won because the community found her skills as a surgeon more useful than Kiso's pharmacy background. Wylek was heartbroken when he heard this, yelling at all the promises he had been given before announcing he would return to the mainland to be with his wife. However, Beatrice prevented this because he was the only one capable of managing the water delivery system. Later, Daniela arrived on the island, and the residents didn't notice that two gang members were hiding on the boat. At night, Daniela saw Ilk spying on her and shouted at him. At the same time, Joachim tried to hide the bottle, but he felt drawn to the liquor and eventually closed it. In the morning, Ike began climbing the mill to sabotage the motor. Kim saw him on the security cameras. When Ike stopped to move behind it, he slipped and fell but managed to stand again. He tried to climb the mill again, slipped, broke his leg, and remained hanging on a step. Shortly after, the ambulance arrived and took him to Mark and Judith. They had no choice but to amputate his leg. When Daniela arrived, she panicked and ran. After the operation, Mark confronted Daniela, who confessed that she wasn't actually a surgeon and had memorized Mark's book to answer the questions. She promised to help Mark and Linus, admitting that Linus's days were limited. At that moment, Judith entered the room because she had heard everything and revealed that she knew Linus was infected and that Mark had been using more resources than allowed with him, which was against the rules. Suddenly, Daniela attacked her and started hitting her. She grabbed a fire extinguisher and struck her on the head until she died. She asked Merrick to keep it a secret because she would provide him with enough resources to find the cure and save his son. After that, they threw Judith's body into the sea. The next day, Beatrice tried to influence Fiona to become like her daughter, but Fiona refused. Then Peters revealed that Tom was in prison because he refused to join the team, and she made many threats concerning Fiona's friends. But Fiona didn't give up. She saw the society that studies its structure as a scam, and she didn't care if she ended up at the bottom of the list. That night, Tom's family visited him in prison and noticed he wasn't seriously injured, though he swore he had fallen. At the same time, they brought Oak, who was also unharmed, which proved that the guards treated prisoners with extreme violence. In the lab, Linus fainted, and Merrick spent a lot of resources treating him until he regained consciousness. The next morning, Fiona was on her way to work when she suddenly fainted in the middle of the road. She woke up in her bed, and Merrick came to check on her, confirming that she had been miscarried. Lola asked Merrick to keep this secret from Beatrice, and created a confidential patient record. Meanwhile, Beatrice was worried about Judith and went to ask Joachim about the procedure, but he said he had been out and didn't remember anything. After explaining that Etienne had repaired the mill, Beatrice went to the clinic and found a tooth stuck on the wall. She immediately confronted Merrick, accusing him of killing Judith, but Merrick laughed because he knew Beatrice needed him and wouldn't be able to expel him. Then Beatrice said she would make it look like Ulrich was the one who killed Judith, leaving Merrick feeling guilty. In another town meeting, Beatrice told everyone that Ulrich killed Judith and that Lisa had helped her with a fake exchange. Everyone voted to punish Ulrich except for Fiona's group, Merrick, and Tom's family. After the meeting, Joachim visited Lisa and Etienne, who became responsible for the mills since Joachim could no longer work. Joachim said many people knew he had been addicted, and Lisa had access to Peter's resources, meaning she had arranged things to promote her husband, but both denied it. During the day, Lisa offered Joachim a job at her house to make him feel useful. Later, the residents gathered on the beach to see Oak tied with heavy chains and left near the water so the waves would slowly kill him. Merrick felt immense guilt and decided to return to the lab to reveal all his secrets to Linus. On the day the global apocalypse dominated the world, Merrick was returning home to the island with young Linus, while his wife Tessa was still in the hospital collecting samples from the dead and infected. Before he could pass through, he had to prove that he lived there and was not infected. Later, Merrick entered a supermarket quietly to get supplies and met Beatrice arranging shelves. She let him take food without paying. Back on the island, Merrick and Nurse Laura worked together to start a testing station. Meanwhile, Peters gave a long speech to the other employees, and they united to take control of the store. They painted over the windows, and when customers refused to comply, they announced a new system. Customers would submit lists, and employees would retrieve the items. Many were upset because they previously received small amounts to prevent hoarding. Beatrice pretended to be armed to make the employees cooperate. At night, when the manager left the store, the angry customers kidnapped him, and Beatrice locked the door, asking employees to vote on their next actions. They decided not to open the doors. The manager was killed. Later, Peters opened the doors when the team threatened to hit the customers. Those who dropped their weapons ran in fear, and the team collected the weapons and sent them after the customers. Little Hannock watched from inside the store. The next day, Beatrice called the island police chief and said she had organized a private militia by manipulating the youth to protect their homes. She explained that they needed a plan to secure the island and save it from the disaster controlling the world. Initially, the officer refused, but Beatrice changed his mind when she showed him the kidnapped customer in her cart bag. Soon after, Beatrice took control of the island's pharmacy by keeping it within her store. Lola began recording her to show the public the good she was doing for the community. When Merrick discovered all this, he threatened to report it to the authorities, arguing that an unqualified person couldn't be responsible for the medicine. Beatrice told him she was the authority, silencing him. She allowed Merrick to take the medicine he needed for the experiments. Later, the mayor gathered all the island residents and accused Beatrice and her group of violent vigilantism. Beatrice gave a manipulative speech, explaining how the store manager had been killed and how she maintained the market, even bringing the kidnapped customer as evidence. Merrick tried to object, but the police chief supported Beatrice's story. Later, the residents beat the kidnapped customer to show support for Beatrice's policies. Merrick tried to help, but he was pulled back, and the police took the man to the sea. In another speech, he convinced the residents to let the man drown. At night, Merrick called Tessa, who was making progress in understanding the virus. At that moment, an angry mob broke into the hospital, killing all the staff. When they cornered Tessa, she threatened to break a test tube containing the virus, but they didn't believe her and started destroying her lab. Merrick had to watch on the screen as Tessa was mercilessly attacked. Meanwhile, Beatrice spoke with Laura about maintaining a reasonable population to ensure supplies. She noticed the number 513 on a calendar announcement, and told Laura that 513 was the ideal number to maintain the island's genetic diversity, claiming it was calculated by the local scientist. Laura was shocked because this meant they had to eliminate half the island's population. Beatrice threatened to expel her if she didn't help. Laura had no choice but to comply. Later, waves brought infected bodies to the island that had been thrown from the mainland. Laura and Beatrice took blood samples and then injected one of the residents with the infected blood, claiming it was protection against the virus. The man soon felt extreme weakness, ran outside, and collapsed dead in front of many people, reinforcing Beatrice's story. Afterwards, Merrick began testing all the island residents, and Lola recorded everything as part of Beatrice's propaganda campaign. Merrick and Lore tested all the blood, and the results came back clean, but Beatrice knew half the island was infected. Initially, Merrick refused to be part of it, but Beatrice explained it was necessary to prevent the same disaster from happening again. Merrick agreed, and Beatrice provided him with resources to develop the vaccine, making him feel guilty and think of his son. Merrick then visited all the fake infected residents, accompanied by guards, and forced them to leave the island by ferry until only 513 people remained. Some tried to resist but were beaten during the operation. Merrick watched in horror, vowing to find the vaccine and bring Beatrice to justice once the epidemic ended. In the present, Linus told Merrick that what he did was selfish, but he still loved him. Then Linus died, and Merrick was devastated, collapsing completely. He took Linus's confession tape, intending to reveal the truth to the entire island. When Lore came to take it, Fiona grabbed Merrick first because she agreed with the idea. At that moment, Daniela appeared with a gun, forcing Fiona to hand over the tape, then struck Merrick to destroy the evidence and announced that the Earl was coming, meaning things were about to change. On the mainland, Spark told the Earl the location of the ship with the lab, and they brought it to start their plan. Meanwhile, on the island, gang members killed a council member. And with that, the series ended. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel.